sounds like a puppet regime reacting to Putin's talking points. That's literally what it sounds like. These are Putin's talking points. And he is smart enough to know that when he says that our NATO alliance, which, by the way, was probably one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century, because it keeps us safe, not just our allies, but it keeps us safe, and it's a bargain. The idea that somehow we pay for NATO, we don't pay for NATO. NATO pays for itself. Each of the countries contribute to their own defense. They're supposed to reach 2% of their own GDP. The United States and a few others, Greece, ironically, is one of them because their economy is so bad. But it has been one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century to keep us safe. It has worked immeasurably. And the idea, who is asking to get pulled out of NATO except for Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, and you know, John Heilemann, right now there's a question within the FBI and within a sizable chunk of America whether Donald Trump is working on behalf of Russia. Certainly, whether he's doing it formally or whether he's doing it because Vladimir Putin has compromised material on him. But if someone were an agent for the Russians sitting in the Oval Office, what are the three things that they would want to do the most? Number one, they would want to disband NATO. Number two, they would want to ease sanctions on oligarchs, people close to Vladimir Putin. And number three, the biggest prize right now, withdraw all American troops from Syria and start turning the Middle East over to Russia and an ex-Soviet spy.
Yeah, and I'd add one more, Joe, to that list. I'm not sure where you'd rank it in Vladimir Putin or any Russian leader's hierarchy, but that would be to undermine the fabric of American democratic institutions and to cause internal dissent within the United States.
And John, hey, let's try one more also. How about attacking the intel communities that have chased the Soviet Union's designs for everything that they did from 1917 forward, and now causing Vladimir Putin fits? I mean, Donald Trump is actively undermining the FBI, the CIA, the intel community, and his lackeys are doing the same thing. There was actually a buffoon on Fox News that talked about abolishing the FBI. That's how crazy it's gotten.
Yes, it's madness, and I bundle that all up in a giant, in one giant kind of catch-all for these essential American institutions. The law enforcement and intelligence community is one. The courts are another. There are a variety of them, right? But we've talked many times for the last 2 years about Donald Trump as kind of, with his head in some ways, kind of a battering ram against American institutions. Those are the foundation of what makes the country strong. The country's strength is what counterbalances Russia on the world stage, and particularly Russian aggression. So if you're Vladimir Putin, ripping to shreds American institutions is one giant goal, and then everything that you pointed out on the other world stage is another. I think, you know, it's not, I think, sometimes helpful to discuss the notion of Trump as a Russian agent, only because I think people think that makes him somehow like an undercover spy or something. I do think that the notion that he's an asset, unwitting or witting.
Asset, exactly.
I'm not criticizing you. I just think I think it's agent doing the work of the Soviets. Technically could be true, but I do just think asset is probably the word that doesn't cause people to immediately shut their ears sometimes. Whether it's witting, whether it's unwitting, it's the big question that's on the table right now about him. And the fact that he said yesterday, I've never worked for Russia, just made you think over and over again about our two previous embroiled in potential impeachments, Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon saying, Bill Clinton, I never had sexual relations with that woman, and Richard Nixon, I am not a crook. Turned out they were lying. Maybe Donald Trump is too.
Well, it was the first time you actually gave an answer to that too, Joe.
Yeah, and Willie also. Yeah, John is right. It is asset and not agent. That's me at 6:03 in the morning. But let's just state what's obvious. Donald Trump could never be an agent for Russia because he and I'm serious. He doesn't have the bandwidth to do it. He doesn't have the discipline to do it. He blurts everything out that's in his mind. But is he an asset? You know what?
100%.
Just judging, 100% he might be. Let's put it that way, Mika. But again, you judge a tree by its fruits. You look at what Donald Trump has been trying to do on the international stage, and there is not a Republican on Capitol Hill today that wouldn't say that what he has been doing is trying to help Putin, praising Putin. Willie, I mean, his words and deeds leave no doubt that this guy is trying to help Russia any way he can.
Well, at the very least, he's an easy mark for Vladimir Putin. And Susan Page, we had that moment, we're looking at the tape right here, where he stopped on his way to New Orleans, took some questions from reporters, and you had NBC's Kristen Welker ask him in an extraordinary moment. We've gotten numb to these moments over the last couple of years, but whether or not he was working for Russia, whether or not the President of the United States was working for Russia, a question the President had to address and finally gave a straight answer on it after dancing around it in his interview with Jeanine Pirro on Saturday night.
You know, what a moment, not just that this question be asked, but that no one would doubt that it needed to be asked. It needed to be asked a second time because he didn't directly respond the first time he was asked by a friendly interviewer. It seems to me we're back to we're coming up at the 2-year mark since President Trump's inauguration, and it seems to me we're back to a fundamental puzzle from that campaign, which is what accounts for the Donald Trump's attitude toward Russia that we saw at the Republican convention and during that campaign. And that is a question that has not yet really been answered. This latest piece of evidence, this shocking New York Times story about serious consideration of the United States withdrawing from NATO, these are just extraordinary times.
It really is. And Mika, I hate to just keep going back to this, but it is so critical. And I remember Jay Norlinger at the National Review saying in 2016 that he thought the most important moment in the campaign, as far as an interview went, may have been when Donald Trump came on our show in December of 2015, and when pressed on Vladimir Putin, called him a strong leader.
Yeah.
When pressed several times by all of us over the fact that he assassinated journalists and he assassinated political opponents, and whether that caused Donald Trump concern, his response, we kill a lot of people too, and was then talking about U.S. soldiers in Iraq. And so he was blaming our soldiers and Marines and U.S. troops to Vladimir Putin assassinating journalists. That was a telling moment.
That was a huge moment.
And raised questions not only in our minds, but in a lot of other people's minds. But you can just trace events from that point forward, and they just don't make sense.
No,
None of them make sense. His kowtowing in Helsinki doesn't make sense. His telling aides he wants to get out of NATO does not make sense.
Yeah.
No president that has been in his chair, sitting in his chair before him, has ever even considered that for a moment.
Well, I know that moment for us was a big one, and we looked at him differently ever since that moment. You know, it was you could see our faces in real time on television, literally transition from seeing him as, you know, a reality star buffoon who kind of is bumbling his way toward the presidency because of his branding ability. We saw that he could win. We also saw at that moment, like, whoa, what is going on here? And we looked at him differently ever since, and he gave us material to worry about as it pertained to Russia every step of the way.
And Willie, he continues to do that. I mean, I know you remember, I remember you on set that day. All of us, we were shocked, and for good reason. It just didn't make sense. Like Helsinki didn't make sense. Like, you know, like this NATO situation didn't make sense. Like Syria doesn't make sense.
Like calling Russia strong and powerful.
You start stacking 20, 30, 40 things as it pertains to Vladimir Putin up that just make absolutely no sense. And my gosh, a narrative emerges that becomes deeply disturbing and requires us to ask that question that Kristen Wilkins asked yesterday. Welker asked yesterday. It's early.
No, I mean, listen, and the question you asked him in December of 2015, where he got that answer where he said, we kill a lot of people too, was odd for many reasons. Among them was there wasn't really a criticism directly of Hillary Clinton, who he expected to run against, or a criticism of the sitting president, Barack Obama. It was an odd statement of equivalence between the United States and Russia that